Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. Strikes and protests have gripped France as discontent over pension reform reaches a new high. The French government has used a controversial measure known as Article 49.3 to raise the retirement age without a vote in Parliament. MPs filed 2 no-confidence motions, which the government narrowly survived. Increasing the age of retirement is a sensitive issue in many European countries, especially as inflation continues to bite. Pensions and the cost of living crisis are among the topics that we're going to explore today with our guest, European Commissioner Nicolas Schmit. He's in charge of jobs and social rights. Commissioner Schmit, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you.
So firstly, on this whole situation in France, when you see these strikes, the protests, the use of a tool by the government that has been widely seen as undemocratic, it doesn't really look like the social solidarity economy that you champion, does it?
Well, first, I think this is a really national issue, and I would not, as a commissioner, comment or intervene in what kind of constitutional article has been used to adopt this reform. That's the responsibility of the French government, and it's the responsibility of the French Parliament. Certainly, I'm watching the social movements, and well, the better option is always social dialogue. I think this is what the Commission is going for and promoting. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
When you hear French unions say going up to 64 years is not realistic in some sectors, you know, food processing or textile factory floors and so forth, it's going to be too many years of work in those hard jobs. As someone who comes from the Luxembourg socialist tradition, do you have sympathy for that sort of view?
Well, I think the pension age cannot be the same for everybody. That's clear. If you have a tough job, if you start early in your life, if you are broken, and some people are broken, not when they are 60, but even before, you cannot expect these people to work up to an age beyond, I don't know which age, but at least longer. Yeah. So, and I think that there has to be a differentiation. There has to be criteria of hardship taken into account, your health issues, and the pensions have to be, or the age in your working life has to be better prepared. I think this is the big challenge. If you want people to work longer, you have to prepare them to work longer. That's about working conditions. That's about investing in their skills. They might evolve, change the way how they work. If you consider that somebody can work the same way when he is 20 and at 64, I think this is not realistic.
Are you seeing any convergence on those elements that you just mentioned, preparing people for retirement? Because obviously this is about social protections in EU countries, not just about the actual age of retirement. So are you seeing any convergence on those preparations for retirement?
You know, the European Union has no competence in the area of pensions. We cannot decide what should be the ideal pension age. What we say is you have to have a pension system which is sustainable, financially also, and which gives adequate results, which means that people should not be in poverty. But I think the discussion on aging population, we are in Europe an aging population, in relation to the working life should be opened everywhere. And we have to see and we have to look at working conditions, very important, because we are now in a period of shortage of labor. And if we are in a period of shortage of labor, you have to better respect labor because it becomes rarer. It's more, you do not have as many of it. And that's why I think we need this debate on how to organize our working life, especially when you become older, when you reach pension age, then you have perhaps to adjust the way how you work and what kind of work you have.
So you mentioned poverty, and the EU says that it wants to lift 15 million people out of poverty by 2030, and some are saying that that's not going to be possible without a directive on a minimum income, not to be confused with a minimum wage, but an actual minimum income. And that's, of course, very relevant to working conditions that you've just been talking about. What's your position on that? Do you think there should be such a directive?
Well, we have made a recommendation with a lot of, I think, very important pieces of advice and recommendations how member states should combat poverty, not just by having a better minimum income, which allows you to have a decent life, but also by helping people to be included in society, to find a job, to get a job, to be skilled, to have decent housing at a affordable price. These are elements which help to combat poverty. So I think what we need to combat poverty is a comprehensive approach, and we have put a lot in this recommendation. Now, okay, maybe a directive could be a bit more compulsory, but it is an area where finally the European Union has not very large competencies. So we use the recommendation, and we will follow up on member states' policies precisely to get poverty down and to achieve the objective of, as I say, at least 15 million people out of poverty.
You mentioned the question of social inclusion, and I think platform workers is kind of relevant to that whole debate. So these are people that work for Uber Eats, Deliveroo, and so forth. And it seems that things are moving on this file. The Swedish presidency of the EU has put a proposal on the table now. Do you think that current proposal goes far enough to protect these workers, which many people say have too much precarity in their conditions?
Well, I think there's a Commission proposal first, and I think this Commission proposal is, in my view, and it will not surprise you, is a quite balanced one. Now, this is in the discussion in the Council. Now the Swedish presidency has made new proposals to find a compromise on the basis of the Commission proposal.
Are they watering down the Commission's?
Sure, there are some elements. I would not like now to anticipate the discussion which will take place in the Council and especially in the working group of the Council. But we have to make sure that such a directive is consistent. It should not be just a directive to have a directive. At the end, it has to have a real impact on the living and working conditions of the platform workers, which does not mean that every platform worker should become an employee. But those who are real employees should be treated as employees with all the rights and all the benefits employees get.
And when those platforms themselves say that any major reclassification will lead to big job losses, do you buy that argument, or is that just an excuse?
Yeah, I do not really buy it, because I see platforms who give their workers a labor contract, who give them the normal benefits all workers have, and they have not disappeared from the market. So they are the best proof that another way is possible. So that platform does not mean just you have to be self-employed or you should not have this normal health insurance, pension, and also at least minimum wage. And I think that's the way we have to go.
Let's talk a little bit about the cost of living crisis in Europe. We mentioned this when I last interviewed you 6 months ago, and you said that it was very important for Europe to support small and medium-sized enterprises. You said they are Europe's job creators. Since then, we've had some more statistics about bankruptcies. So according to Eurostat, if you look at the last quarter of 2022, a 26.8% increase in bankruptcy declarations compared to the third quarter of last year. That's a really big increase in people going bust. And I'm wondering if that means that Europe is somehow failing its small and medium-sized enterprises.
Well, I think we have to have a cautious look on these figures. First, we had very intense and large subsidy schemes during the COVID crisis, which was a very difficult period for many small and medium-sized companies. But astonishingly, not many of them went bankrupt during the COVID crisis for the good reason, because they got the support and the subsidies. Now we are out of COVID, and some of them have used all their reserves, their liquidities, and they are in trouble. Now, some of them...
There needs to be a new initiative then, perhaps.
Well, some of them, anyway, would have been in trouble anyway. So that's a fact. So it depends always how you compare the figures, to which figures you compare. So there's an increase because we went out of the subsidy regimes due to COVID, and now they are in trouble. But certainly we have to look at that, and we have to, those who can, who have the strength, who have the potential to continue, they have to be supported. But that cannot mean that you support everybody. You know, we always have this, also among, and mainly among small and medium-sized, well, companies are created and some disappear. And then some new companies come and are created again. So we have to have a more cautious view on that. But certainly we have to allow smaller and medium-sized companies to continue, because now after COVID we have the inflation, and some of them also struggle with rising prices.
We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time, for being my guest, Commissioner Schmit. And do stay with us for part 2 of Talking Europe. That's coming up in a few minutes after the news bulletin here on France 24.